Thank you to Camelia and Brittany Grimes for facilitating this collaborative webinar. We've been getting lots of questions from faculty about our office and where to find foundation opportunities. So we thought you would hear from myself and Maria in a short presentation, and then we'll do a panel afterwards. We appreciate our distinguished panelists, Dr. Scott Simon, representing the College of Medicine and Penn State Health, Christina Grosinger, representing Huck and Ag, Josh Gross, representing the Department of Nutrition and HHD. So Maria and I will be moderating. Maria, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Maria Petrolak, Associate Director of Foundation Relations. I do support the entire university, but I am specifically embedded at the College of Medicine and Penn State Health in Hershey.
Perfect. And I'm Karen Kimirimbe. I'm an Associate Director of Foundation Relations, and I support the Eberly College of Science, Huck, Nursing, and previously EMS. These slides will be shared, so all those that are registered should have access to them. So we thought in order to be on the same page for the panel, I'll start with a quick definition of what foundations are. In a nutshell, defined by the IRS, they are tax-exempt organizations that are created from seed endowment money from an individual or a business. There's different types depending on how they're organized and who contributes to the endowment. So independent foundations usually have an independent board, and family members don't have much of a say in funding disbursements. Family foundations, on the other hand, family members do have a huge say on who gets the money. And then corporate foundations, where the seed money comes from businesses, they tend to fund either research related to the products they sell, or they fund economic development for areas where their staff members live. So essentially for foundations, the endowment or the seed money is invested, and to stay tax exempt, the foundations have to pay out 5% of their assets in the form of grants for charitable purposes. Research at Penn State would count as a charitable purpose because it's for the public good. Expected total award disbursements tend to vary by investment returns, and this is based on a 3 to 5 year average, depending on the foundation. So foundations have both competitive, which are RFP based, and non-competitive funding mechanisms. Some misnomers out are the National Science Foundation. It's not really a foundation. And then just because something has corporation in the name doesn't mean it's not a foundation, like the Carnegie Corporation of New York is indeed a foundation. Next slide, please. So here are examples of nonprofit funders that have engaged with Penn State applicants.
Slides, actually.
Can others see the slides?
Yeah, so I'm seeing your
I'm
slides.
seeing it. Okay, then it's just me. Okay, never mind.
Okay, so these are examples of nonprofit funders that have engaged with Penn State applicants. Some of these invite specific universities to apply, others are relationship driven, others don't have published funding opportunities, while the most that we work with have RFPs, requests for proposals, so similar to federal grants. Because each foundation is completely different in its structure and operations, our office helps facilitate faculty applications, and it helps you navigate the complexity. Next slide, please. So our office essentially helps connect Penn Staters with private foundations to advance the university's research and programmatic strengths. So in a given week, we might meet with a specific foundation program officer to give us intel on what they're looking for a particular RFP, or we might help a grad student with a mock interview. If they're a finalist for a fellowship, we might work with the limited submissions office to disseminate a foundation opportunity and help guide the anonymous faculty reviewers to pick the right person, or we might work with a research administrator in a particular unit to help a faculty member with proposal development. Maria and I meet monthly with Christina to discuss Huck funding priorities and if they might align with upcoming foundation opportunities. We're a central office, so we cover all 24 campuses and the College of Medicine and Penn State Health. We are not under the OSVPR, we're under university development. Because we treat each nonprofit sponsor the same way we would treat an individual donor, they often require a strong relationship with the university. Next slide, please. So I covered most of what we do, but this slide summarizes it. In a nutshell, we identify opportunities, disseminate them, work with university leadership on their fundraising strategy, work with faculty and research administrators on letter and proposal development. We maintain external foundation relationships, otherwise known as stewardship, and then we build new ones, otherwise known as cultivation. We manage 363 foundations on behalf of Penn State in our office, but across campus, there's a staff person assigned to all the 690 foundations. In terms of timing, because people ask this, there's usually 3 to 12 months from RFP announcement to the award, but for non-competitive or relationship-based ones, it can sometimes be 3 months or 3 years. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, these slides will be shared, so you'll be able to see more of what I'm talking about on your own. But I just wanted to highlight a few things on this slide. We help plan for internal site visits. This is when a foundation visits campus. We can help you get on Neely, Fotis's, or Andrew Reed's calendars. We also coordinate external site visits where university leadership visits a foundation. In that case, we write the briefs. That way Neely or Andrew Reed know what to talk about. We also attend Big Ten conferences with our other university colleague, corporate and foundation relations staff people, and also the national CFR conferences. And at these conferences, a lot of program officers and foundation presidents attend, and it's usually our opportunity to build relationships with different foundation staff that fund Penn State research. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we do for faculty, we meet one-on-one to discuss your research, your goals, maybe especially for early career faculty, and then we can give you a list of relevant funders. If there's a particular RFP, we attend the info sessions and help faculty develop the best proposal. We also give department talks when invited by department heads, and we keep track of faculty engagement with foundations. So for example, if we know that a faculty member was a reviewer for, say, Keck or a Gates review panel, we would ask them if they are willing to give general advice from their experience to help future Penn State applicants put in the best proposal. So to put all this in a Penn State perspective, foundations and industry brought in $134 million to Penn State in FY25, but that number does not include subawards from other universities that got foundation money, and it doesn't include scholarship money from foundations to graduate students and undergrads. So it is a significant amount of money. Next slide, please. So we're asked where people can find foundation opportunities. Here I put InfoReady at the top. That lists internal seed awards as well as limited submissions and foundation opportunities. There's an L Funding Ops email listserv that you can opt into. And then I also listed resources for graduate students in your labs and postdocs. If you need to find a collaborator, I listed Penn State Pure. Next slide, please. Externally, I use the University of Washington and Northwestern Foundation Funding Opportunities Dashboard. They list everything from postdoc opportunities to early career established faculty opportunities. I encourage you to go there and look at those because InfoReady isn't always the most up-to-date. Just keep in mind that those external links won't have Pennsylvania relevant foundations. And feel free to email our office to give you the Penn State context. In general, if you find an opportunity you like, you would fill out your college's intake form, for example, Eberly or ERA, depending what college you're in, and then you would work with a research administrator and our office to draft your proposal. Next slide. This could be you. Feel free to reach out to our office, find relevant opportunities. These are some of your Huck colleagues that have gotten money from the Gates Foundation, the Sloan Foundation, Open Philanthropy, the Keck Foundation, etc. Next slide, please. Feel free to contact us with questions, and with that, I'll hand it off to Maria.
Thank you, Karen. I don't see anything happening in the chat, I don't think, so we can go ahead and introduce our panelists. I'm just going to go through and panelists, if you would just introduce yourself and then maybe tell us sort of just the basic how frequently you are applying to private foundation opportunities and any of the success stories that you would like to share. Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Scott Simon, and I'm one of the neurosurgeons down at Penn State Hershey. And I would say that I have had a lot of success in some of the more specific disease foundations, like the Aneurysm Foundation or the B Foundation, which also has to do with aneurysms. I find the emails that we get weekly pretty helpful and pretty informative. And I very much believe that, you want to catch a fish, you got to put a whole bunch of worms in the water. So, once you have a solid proposal, it takes very little. I found personally, it takes very little light editing to make sure that it's appropriate for a different foundation. So I throw a lot of them in there.
Great, thank you, Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Grosinger. I'm the Publius Virgilius Mary Professor of Entomology, and I'm also the director of the Huck Institutes of the Life Sciences. And I've been involved with the Research Corporation of Scientific Advancement, which has a Scialog series. I can talk more about it later, but I'm a facilitator for that. And I've received funding from the Sloan Foundation, and then my graduate student just received funding from the Simons Foundation. And I've applied for a couple of other foundation grants, which I have not received. But I sort of echo Scott's comments of, like, look for these opportunities and then think about how to take the projects that you're already doing and craft them into ways that will fit with these different calls. There's a lot more opportunities than I think most of us realize.
Thank you. And Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Gross. I'm relatively new assistant professor in Department of Nutritional Sciences. I also have a secondary appointment in biobehavioral health. And I've been, I was a little reluctant in full transparency to join today when asked, just because I have not been successful just yet on one of these foundation awards. However, I have submitted several and have been getting increasingly closer and closer from what I can tell. So I would echo what Scott and Christina said, both in terms of, more shots on goal is really, I think, the approach to take here, especially as these get more and more competitive. And in our current, kind of federal funding landscape and climate, I think it's probably increasing demand for folks to try for these opportunities. But I'm happy to share today, all of my experiences and what I've learned thus far, moving forward. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So the first question that I have for the panelists is, how do you determine which of these opportunities has the right return on investment for your time? Because I think time is limited across the university and across all departments. And so what is it that you're looking for in a specific RFP that is put out that really piques your interest and makes it worth your time?
Is this just an open and we just
It's opened. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right. I will start answering that. So I think, and again, sort of in my current role, working with foundation relations, I think one of the important things is to really understand, what the foundation is interested in and what they're looking for, and to develop those relationships. And so that's something I'm working with foundation relations to try to do a little bit more intentionally, so that we're inviting some of these representatives to campus so that we can, again, learn better what their interests are and what their future interests are, so that we can help our faculty find the right programs to target. And I think, again, a lot of times with these foundations, it's not the reviewers are not necessarily going to be scientists in your field. So it's really, really important that whatever you're proposing has that broader appeal. And so I think trying to also help our faculty, find ways to talk about the work that they're doing or think about it in these broader contexts will be really helpful. But for me, we've been trying to select opportunities that seem like they're good fits for researchers in life sciences, and then highlight those. But I think as we develop, stronger relationships with these foundations, we can be more successful in those attempts as well.
Thank you. Scott, did you have anything to lend to this? Because I know you're very strategic about which opportunities you pursue.
I don't know how you came to that conclusion. I'm the exact opposite. Like if there's any way that it could have something to do with what I do, like I'm willing to lightly edit something I've done before and send it in.
That's a strategy, though. I think, and it seems to be a winning strategy for you.
Yeah, well, everybody could do better, but yeah, I would say if you're that selective about the time you put into applying for grants, you're probably not going to get a lot of grants.
That's good feedback. Josh, did you have something?
I've generally done the same thus far in terms of whether the scientific scope or interest from the foundation is even remotely within the ballpark, or, if I can throw a curveball well enough to stay within the ballpark. I've been kind of shooting for it. Something I've been trying to do increasingly that I didn't in the first couple of go-arounds is most of these foundations tend to publish at least the title and a little bit of information about prior recipients of the award. And so I think that's can be helpful to cross-reference those to see in general what are the types of projects that they have been interested in funding. And that's probably not a sure thing. They may want to increasingly diversify their portfolio, so to speak, in terms of scientific interest. But it is, I think, a good starting point just to see whether my science and my proposal would fit broadly within the wheelhouse of what they've funded in the past.
Have you ever read any of the research that any of your competitors have already published that is sort of along the same lines, to sort of see what it is that you think that they're proposing? Like, do you have the time to go that deep, or are you just mainly looking at titles?
It's an excellent idea and probably something I should consider doing, but no, I have not gone that deep. To the greatest extent has been kind of looking up that particular scientist and really on their webpage, or just kind of summary information about their areas of interest. But that's about the depth that I've gone in this context.
Great. And I know that we have noticed that foundations are paying attention to lab websites and things like that. So we are sort of promoting search engine optimization and trying to use keywords on your web pages, trying to keep things up to date. Anything new that you've published, get it on there, so that if a foundation goes on a spelunking mission, they can, find some information about what you've been doing besides, the proposal that's in front of them. Are there any new funding trends that you're seeing within sort of your vein of science? And I don't know if we want to go down the list with this one, or if you want to just, Christina has her microphone off, so I'm wondering if you have something to add.
I always have things to add. So I was to sort of finish up the last question. Another thing I think just to point out is that a lot of these foundation proposals are a lot shorter than what we would normally experience through like NSF or USDA or NIH. And so that's something to be aware of. So again, this idea of being able to apply broadly is maybe not so challenging because the proposals are very, very short, right? And so that's something just to keep in mind. If you see one of these RFPs coming through, take a look at it, because it'll be very different from what you've experienced normally.
Yeah, often the first round is just a one-page letter.
Yeah. So again, they're looking for like broad concepts, and if they find them compelling, and so it is, it does make it a lot easier to try to apply for these things. So I am looking mostly for things that are related to behavior and neurobiology, just because my personal interest. And so I am seeing a lot of those, and then also sort of areas that maybe are no longer being funded very actively by federal grants. Some foundations are now picking up those areas as well. So it again seems to be sort of balancing out some of the changes that we're seeing with the federal government. And I don't know if I can I'm going to put this in the chat. This is the group that I'm involved with, but I think the chat may have just gone to the host and Palinilla. So if somebody else has the ability to send it to everybody else. This is this Scialog group that I'm part of, which is looking at neurobiology and changing ecosystems. And I think this is a really interesting model to consider for those of you who might work in this space. These are 3-year programs, and you can apply to be a fellow and part of this program. They're looking for early career people. I'm a facilitator, so I don't apply for these grants, but I help other people at these meetings. And we actually have 4 faculty at Penn State who are fellows as part of this right now, and one of them was funded through this program. So I encourage you to take a look at it, and it's again very, very broad. So it's everything from like, microbes and ocean systems to human health. So again, these foundations are thinking really, really broadly when they have their calls.
Thank you. Josh or Scott, did you have anything else to?
I think what I tend to see very often now is, the verbiage of high risk, high reward research, and explicitly stating that they're looking for the kinds of proposals or applications that would typically not be funded by the NIH. So I think they are trying to, fill that gap or that void. And perhaps it's part of the reason I've struggled with some of them, because my research is very much anchored in drug development and kind of more traditional modes of science, and kind of iteratively building on itself and moving towards ideally an IND at the end of the road. And so I've been trying to carve out, my own niche within what seems to be what they're looking for now. But I think big kind of transformative ideas tends to be the kind of notion that I see pop up over and over again with these foundation awards.
I would say that keeping in mind that I'm doing, work in cerebrovascular, which doesn't really, necessarily overlap with what the university at large might be doing, although there are plenty of collaborations. Certainly there's a lot of focus on specific populations, especially foundations that are related to those populations. So women in stroke, Black population in stroke, rural populations in stroke, urban populations in stroke. So it's not particularly hard in today's day and age to actually get some very interesting and thorough demographic information on the makeup of the average patient or the population distributions, and explain how whatever you're looking at in stroke actually, benefit this group or that group.
We have also noticed a lot of foundations are they've grown weary of incremental change. So the high risk, high reward thing sort of comes into play there, where they want to see big ideas to make big change and big improvement now, as opposed to 10 years from now. And I know that can be both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what it is that you're proposing to a foundation. But that seems to be a very common trend. Do you think that you could share? I think there's some things happening in the chat, and I don't know.
Maria, there was a question for you. Do you have any insights as to whether HHMI had a great postdoc, whether that postdoc program will be reinstated?
That's a great question. I don't have any insights at this point. I do know that they are, HHMI is sort of doubling down on what are the key principles that they are supportive of, and they are unwilling to sort of fold in the whole DEI space, whereas other institutions have basically scrubbed their DEI opportunities and things that are to specifically benefit certain populations. So I wish that I had a clear answer on that, but we're paying attention to what they're doing, and it seems as though they are also sort of reshuffling and making certain opportunities instead of being like a longer cycle. They're trying to offer things more repetitively throughout the year. So stay posted, and if you want to shoot me an email, we can chat about it offline as well. Was there anything else that was in the chat that you wanted to?
Kelsey had a question. Any tips for grants that can support international collaborations and or community participatory research internationally? Christina, I know you have some international collaboration grants. Do you
Yeah,
think you could
so
address that?
yeah, I put in the chat. So there's the Human Science Frontiers program. And to Kelsey's asking the point of, does the funding go to the international collaborators? It does. So for that particular program, each individual will get their own funding stream. And it's the goal with that program is to fund projects that are bringing people together from across disciplines. So they really have to be very distinct areas of research and then different countries, right? So it's a really great program, and again funds really interdisciplinary kind of work. And then I think I would say also the Simons Foundation, at least the call that they recently had, is also would be funding each individual partner, no matter what country that they're coming from.
Yes, so Kelsey, it depends on the foundation. Some foundations in the eligibility criteria will mention whether or not they can have international collaborators. And yeah, I agree with Christina. The Simons Foundation is a good one. I'll put the link in the chat.
Um, Back to the sort of the questions, could you all on the panel share any helpful resources that you think would be good for other PIs to know that you regularly use in order to either find opportunities or to actually go through the process of doing a submission?
Well, I'll say on our end, you should sign up for the Huck newsletter because we send out a funding flash newsletter that includes information about upcoming opportunities. And again, there are a lot. And if you look at InfoReady, again, you can see all of them. And we try to sort of select the ones that would make most sense for our life sciences researchers. I would also encourage people to sign up for newsletters from those organizations, right? So a lot of them will have newsletters that they send out, and then you can get a sense of, again, what are the things that they're prioritizing and focusing on.
So I think things that I try to do regularly are check, the websites and the funding mechanism websites of the organizations that are big players in your space. So for me, that might be American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, as well as others. But I think the advice to get on the mailing list is very valuable because, we all I'm gonna check every first of the month or something, and then it's the third and you've forgotten to do it and you're not going to remember. So having them reach out to you, especially if they're allowing you to automate it, is very valuable advice that I would encourage people to take advantage of.
Yeah, I would echo exactly that point. And also the list that Karen included earlier, if that'll be shared out, that looked very comprehensive in terms of all the places that you can go to reliably find these opportunities. But I've largely relied upon just routinely going to InfoReady and kind of scrolling through based on the date, and also trying to square that or reconcile that with my other goals in terms of teaching or grant writing, and what's a good deadline for me to feasibly meet, and getting on listservs as much as you can, I think, is quite helpful. So I would say the majority of ones that I'm particularly interested in through the Center for Neuroscience listserv, coming from Nikki Crowley, part of the Huck. So yeah, I think find your kind of niche area and what the relevant listserv would be, and that's a very fruitful way to be aware of these things.
I would
Thank
echo
you.
what everyone has said. Some foundations will post an RFP with only 4 weeks from announcement to the deadline. So if you're not on the listserv, the email listserv, or if you don't check info already, you might miss it, and then you won't have time to get a research administrator involved in order to submit.
I would also say very quickly, getting to know folks like Karen and Maria and sitting down and having a discussion with them just to share what your scientific interests are. Because I think there are cases, for example, Karen, I think you and I spoke right after I started here about 2 years ago or so. And so now immediately I can kind of be in the back of your mind or on your radar if a particular funding announcement arises, and you can notify me of that. So I think establishing relationships with foundation relations can be another productive way to find out about some of these opportunities.
I always try to focus, there's thousands of foundations and we manage 700-ish across the institution. So there are always new things, and we're seeing a lot of new collaborations where like 5 foundations will go in together and create a new award, and they'll each have a separate stake in that award. And so it's giving them a lot more ability to sort of position themselves differently. It's giving them a lot more flexibility in what they're doing with their resources, and it's opening up a lot more opportunities. But the pace is impossible to keep up with. And our team is very small. There's only 5 of us in foundation relations across the institution. And I'm the sole person for the College of Medicine and Penn State Health. So it can be very challenging, and we know that there's information fatigue as well. But we do try to keep things top of mind, and we keep researchers top of mind whenever something pops up. And I think Scott has been given a ton of opportunities that were not a good fit. And I send information all the time. I've sent things to Josh and I've said, just in case this could be a match for you, please take a look at it. And that's our job. We're never offended if you say, no, it's nothing, like I don't have time, or I don't like the opportunity, or it's not the right science. I would prefer that you know about it and it's not a good fit than not know about it and miss the deadline and go, oh shoot, that would have been great for me. How about collaborations? How do you go about forming we've seen a lot more opportunities where they're requiring co-PIs, or they're requiring teams of 3 from either across departmental collaboration or outside the institution, or sometimes even international collaborators. Any best practices or tips on how to find people to collaborate with?
I guess for me, so I really like collaborating with people. So I have a lot of people that I've been working with, and I don't think it's really necessarily the best idea to see the RFP and then say, let me find a collaborator to apply for with this, right? Because it's better if you already have some established projects that you can sort of pull together, and if you have that network, then that becomes a lot easier to do. I will say I find a lot of my collaborators while I serve on committee meetings. So don't try to get away from service, especially at the sort of college and university level, because often that's where you can sort of find new people. But this is also something, this is part of what we do at the Huck Institutes and why we're supporting so many different centers and institutes under us. And so I would love to get more feedback from people of ways that we could help form those collaborations. So like with the Scilog series, it's very intentional where people are brought together in these workshops and they write grants right in the workshops together. And so it's these, seed funding mechanisms that allow people to start trying these projects. And so I would definitely like to hear from people if you have ideas for how we could help you intentionally find more collaborators. But again, I would suggest working with who you have and trying to expand your network out before, the RFPs come.
We have in the past in our office, since we're central, we see all the proposals going out the door. If someone really needed a collaborator, we could make an introduction on their behalf, and we have done that. So we're happy to do that. And in my slide, I did include a Penn State Pure link, which lists all the Penn State researchers and their focus area. The only issue is that it includes emeritus professors and postdocs or faculty that may have gone elsewhere. So be sure to double check before reaching out to a person.
I would if I could just take this just a little bit off the question, but use this as an opening to make another point, and that is, a successful collaborator is not just someone where there's perfect overlap from topic and technique, but also somebody who's just a good teammate and does a lot of work. And I've been reading about venture capital. I do nothing with venture capital, but just I was reading about it, and they're picking companies to invest in, and they divide them into the ones that have great ideas and the ones that just have a really solid team of successful, experienced people who can bring a project across the finish line. And if you've got someone who you've worked with who answers emails, fills out paperwork, maybe has their own initiatives, so you don't have to do everything, like that might be a more valuable collaboration than someone who has, what in your mind would be the perfect scientific overlap.
That's a really good point. And I also think about too, I think there's a trend for people to try to find, like you were saying, the perfect fit for everything. And it's like you don't have to necessarily meet 100% of whatever it is that they're looking for. Like if your project is within their scope, but it sort of is taking it in a different direction, that could be something that's positive to a foundation because maybe they hadn't considered going this other direction. And so it is taking a chance sometimes and leveraging the teammates that you do have and the co-PIs that you do work with regularly and sort of the synergy that you might have within your relationships and styles. I don't know, Josh, did you have anything else to add? I thought I saw your mic go off or your
Yeah.
mute go off. Okay.
Yet again, I would really echo what was just said there. I think, in the ideal circumstance, you within your own science or your own research program, you're identifying gaps in terms of whether that is usually for me, it would be a technique that is not a bread and butter technique within my own lab, but it would be helpful for advancing a particular project or the research program. And then trying to start locally and kind of search around. We have such a massive community here at Penn State, who is doing that technique or who is, pursuing, ancillary questions using those approaches and reach out to that person and chat with them. But I very much would echo, as I've had a couple collaborations that have strengthened increasingly and other ones that have kind of fizzled away, in large part, the dividing line there has been the productivity and the consistency and the communication ability of that collaborator more so than the scientific prowess or, what particular niche they're filling for you. So I guess I do typically start with the scientific perspective first and then the interpersonal second, but I would say the interpersonal is probably at the end of the day actually more important.
Christina, because you do have international collaborators, do you have any tips on, we have seen calls recently where they have gone so far as to require PIs on 2 different continents. So it's not just 2 different institutions, it's 2 different continents. How do you go about sort of forming some of those international connections?
Yeah, so again, sort of thinking strategically of what we can do at Penn State. So we do have, many of our centers will have conferences and symposia that they have almost every year. And so this is a great opportunity when we have these to think about inviting international speakers and participants into that. And also going to these other, to these conferences and also meeting people through those. So I think it is just, again, about having as broad a network as possible. And it is different, like if you've just met somebody at a conference at one point, like trying to set up a collaboration with them can be challenging. But if you've invited them to come to Penn State to give a seminar or to participate in a conference, then you have a much better ability to get to know them and get to work with them. Penn State also does have a number of memorandums of understanding with different universities. And so, those can be another mechanism by which we have, already strong relationships and we can already identify potential collaborators for that. So University of Freiburg would be one of those in Germany that we have an MOU with, and I know there's other ones. So yeah, I think it's again just thinking strategically about the opportunities we have and trying to identify people and bring them in for our seminars and our distinguished lecture series and our symposium conferences.
There was a question in the chat with regard to limited submissions that Katerina asked. I can answer that real quick. So I can't speak for the federal funding opportunities, but at least for foundations, we help the limited submissions office write the limited submission posting on InfoReady, so eligibility, who they're looking for, and then anyone that's interested can apply via InfoReady, like you have to physically apply. And then the OSVP, or the Limited Submissions Office, identifies 3 or 4 faculty members across Penn State that would be good reviewers. That sometimes is difficult because for some reason everyone's busy. So then we provide a one-pager, like a rubric, based on who the foundation has funded in the past and what we know about them. And then those faculty rate applicants in InfoReady, and then Andrew Reed is the one that makes the final say. So that's the general process. But the opportunities come and go, so be sure to check the limited submissions website regularly or opt into the funding opportunities website to know when those are posted. I can put those in the link in the chat. Thank you.
And one thing to add about limited submissions, we have tried to make the process easier for the internal down select. There are still opportunities that when you're in the limited submission just for the institution, you have to submit quite a lot of information in order to be chosen in the down select. But for some of the opportunities, like specifically I have the Mathers Foundation, since it is on a recurring cycle, we have now gone to sort of a one-page impact statement, mostly it's a true letter of interest that is a general overview of what it is that you're proposing. And then if you're chosen, then it goes a step farther and you would submit additional information. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible and as accessible as possible for people to get into some of those limited submission opportunities, because we have heard in the past that PIs have dedicated a great deal of time just into trying to secure the limited submission from Penn State, and then being told no to the limited submission, and then they feel like they've wasted their time. So we are actively trying to make it an easier process for everybody, and time's important to us. So cost sharing. Christina, I feel like you've had some experience with that. So matching requirements are sometimes something that foundations require, or cost sharing of some sort. Best advice and best practices for how to negotiate that with your department.
Yeah, I think, and again, this is something to sort of see with individual departments and colleges, how this works. But, if there are already some existing things, right? Sometimes you can use your salary as part of the cost share, or if you are fortunate that you still have a startup or you have some other internal funding, then that can be considered part of the cost share. In some cases, for agricultural grants, if you're working with a grower, then them letting you work on their land is considered a cost share. If your program has sort of the first year of a graduate student is covered by the program, then that could potentially be a cost share. So there's sort of creative ways that you could try to work out the cost share well. But I think it can get really complicated. So the larger pieces of funding that you can highlight, the better, as opposed to having lots of small little things to track.
I think I've seen cost sharing of a lab too, where there's a shared space, and that could also be considered as a cost sharing mechanism. So it's creative, be creative. Is that sort of
Yes, yeah. Sort of, again, yeah. Think about those big chunks of things that maybe, again, you would normally not necessarily be writing a grant, but is a representative of the university supporting your program, and so then that serves as a cost share.
Scott, have you had any experience with cost sharing?
No, not successfully. I'm in a little bit different space because so much as dependent on maintaining clinical volume. But we do have well, we do perform expert testimony, and the money does not come directly to us. So you can use that as some funds, but that's really departmental funds, and you kind of, maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't.
Great, thank you. So I think one of the other things that I wanted to touch on was just sort of the process. What's your best process for how you approach any of these RFPs that you're responding to? Do you collaborate with your research administrator first? Do you only involve them if there's a budget involved? Do you pitch ideas to sort of your people that you liaise with often in your department? What's sort of the typical process when you see something and you go, ooh, this looks like a good one? What are the first steps? Christina, I see you have your mic off.
So I think that, for me, from when we've applied for some of these, you spend a lot of time looking through the RFP to understand, again, what is it that they're looking for, looking at previous projects that were funded by that group, and again, trying to understand exactly what are the kinds of research that they support. Karen has been super helpful. Thank you, Karen, for giving tips with some of the things that, again, has helped me either decide to go for something or to not. And again, based on kind of the history of what that program is really supporting. And then, some of these, they don't require, like I always check with our contracts and grants office just to make sure if it needs to go through them, but some are, because they're just letters of intent, then they don't need to go through that entire process. And so then it's more, again, just about working with the collaborators in the grant to try to, come up with something that will be very appealing for a broad audience. But again, if people have ideas, like I would love to have some kind of like feedback group of PIs who are applying for these different grants that instead of, waiting for the comments that would come from the review after you've submitted to InfoReady and you get your anonymous reviews, like it would be great if we had a group of faculty who'd be willing to look at each other's proposals so that we could give feedback on how compelling the statements are and if there are ways that we could make them more appealing again to that broad audience.
What do you do if you don't get feedback? Like if it's one of the foundations so we're seeing a high volume of applicants for just about every opportunity across the board. And so a lot of foundations have outwardly said, we will not give you any feedback. What do you do in those scenarios? If you get a no, you have no feedback to go on, what's next?
Yeah, Josh, you had
I was just going to say this, in all honesty, has probably been the most frustrating part of the entire process. The most recent one for me, Malinkrod, where to my understanding from the email that said I didn't get it, said I was very, very close. But given, funding where it is, they couldn't, fund quite as many applications this year as they did last. So to know that I was that close to the finish line, but then they also at the very end said, unfortunately, we can't provide any feedback. So it's been very difficult. And other grants or other awards like the Searly that I applied to as well was the same. So I've had, I think almost every one of them has not provided direct feedback. And that is something that with an NIH grant, getting your summary statement back can be very, very useful for how you tailor and change things next time around. So I would say that has been kind of the one thing that has been a little bit frustrating in terms of maybe hampering how I can improve things next time around.
And I have noticed that a lot of PIs are getting noticed by repeating the application in the next cycle. Like we are seeing that at Penn State where people who are, it used to sort of be frowned upon by certain foundations that they didn't want you to just reapply. But now I almost feel like when you're close like that, Josh, and then you go back to the next cycle and you apply again, they might remember. I'm hypothesizing that this is what's happening, but it seems like they're sort of remembering the science and the people who were close. And then the next time around, they fund it. And so I think that there's, sticking with it and remembering for the next cycle, that can probably be a strategy as well. Christina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess I would sort of say that one thing that I've seen, there's a spectrum, right, where you have a single project that you really want to work on and you try to apply for multiple things with that one project. And then there's another spectrum where I've seen people who come up with entirely different projects for each call. And I think the thing is to be more in the middle where, you have sort of a portfolio of things that you're consistently working on. And so that each time you're submitting it, you're submitting the right kind of proposal for that funding agency, and then you continuously improve it. So you don't just throw everything away if you didn't get it funded. But maybe the next time you come in, you have improvements, or you've been able to make a little progress on it using other sources. So yeah, but it is true. You don't, the volume that they're getting and how short those proposals are, you're not going to get really any feedback on it. So you have to, the more you can get from, again, I think your peers at Penn State would be better.
And I just wanted to add quickly, we try to, at least I do, I try to meet with program officers for a particular foundation maybe once a year. And so we specifically ask, do you allow resubmissions? Do they usually do better than people who've applied for the first time? And they will tell us that information, but it's highly dependent on the foundation. So feel free to email us and we'll tell you.
Thank you. Scott, I'm going to throw this to you. So if you throw a lot of worms in the water and a lot of them come back with no fish, how do you keep going? How do you process all the no's? I mean, some people, it just doesn't seem to bother them. But if you repeat it, I have to, full disclosure here, I'm hearing a lot of no's, like a lot of the PIs that are submitting really great stuff are not getting funded right now at the College of Medicine, and it's making me bonkers. So what do you do? How do you keep going?
Well, I think you have to have reasonable expectations. I think the feedback is particularly important, not because I've found it to be a wellspring of good scientific ideas, but it is a very accurate reflection about how other qualified people are reading what you're writing to make sure that you're saying what you think you're saying. A lot of work can continue in your field without funding, which isn't great, but it's not that it's not happening, especially literature reviews and things. And keep publishing, keep working, find important things for valuable people to do so they stick with you.
Have you
But
seen any upticks in being funded on foundation proposals that you wrote after you published something? Like I'm interested to know if there's any corollary there between like some recently published articles and getting new funding.
I don't have so many successful proposals that I can break them into published and unpublished categories and run an analysis on that. But I will say that when you're writing something, it's inherently easier to just put in a reference to your own work, which is impressive, rather than have to explain preliminary data. It just takes up a big volume of the page.
Great, thank you. Josh and Christina, I don't know if either of you had anything to add on that. No?
Just survival mechanism, just keep going, and eventually I think one of these will come through. But yeah, I mean, have a clock on my startup and want to make sure I'm getting ahead of that, and so just trying to catch a stride to learn each time, to refine as I move forward, and just have to keep going until you get something.
Any thoughts on preliminary data and how to get it when you don't necessarily have the funding and you're looking at opportunities that require it? Any thoughts on that?
I would say we at Penn State, we were very fortunate because we do have a lot of sea grant programs, right? And so, and through Huck, we have them, and through many of the colleges, and then the other interdisciplinary research institutes. So again, this is where I think it's really important to be fairly strategic with these, right? So if you have a project that you're excited about and that you want to seek funding for, consider, using these seed grants as the steps to get to those, to show feasibility for these larger projects. So again, as it's been sort of raised before, for some of these foundations, they really want something that's really risky. And so, so it's not quite the same. I joke sometimes with our federal funding, like you have to have 2/3 of the proposal done before anybody thinks that you can actually do it. But these foundations have a different approach. So I always think preliminary data is great, but for some of them, it's probably not necessary.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Some of them have explicitly said they don't require it. Some said, it's not something you need to worry so much about, in not so many words. But I would also say I have been successful with a couple of seed grants, and I think that has been very useful for not only establishing internal collaborations, because the two that I've gotten most recently required that. And so it's a great way to spearhead that effort to find collaborators. And for, just a mechanism to generate preliminary data. They're usually not nearly the budgets of these private foundation awards or an NIH grant, but they can still get the wheels in motion. So I've found them to be quite helpful. And I think also if you do need to generate preliminary data and you're lacking funding on the project, that's where establishing collaborations really can come in handy, either internally or externally, through all the ways that we discussed earlier.
Thank you.
Yep. We're almost at time, so perhaps if everyone could say one thing they would have faculty do to increase their chances of foundation funding. I have one. One would be, if you're at conferences, talk to foundation program officers. They're usually set up in a booth or something. Just tell them about your work and ask them questions.
Well, I would say, for any of you who are listening who are part of our Huck centers or institutes, and you're having event like symposia or seminar series, consider inviting some of these people to come and present during those, because we would love to have more people from these foundations on campus so that we could learn more what their interests are right now and what will be coming in the future.
Scott, did you want to go?
I would just say, keep churning out the proposals.
Short and sweet. That's great. Josh?
Yeah, I would say take my advice with a very tiny grain of salt, because I haven't gotten one of these yet. But I would exactly echo Scott. I have been, from what I can tell, improving each time, getting kind of closer and closer and closer, with my most recent one probably being the closest. So I'm using that as an indication that I'm almost there. So I think just keep pressing forward, and keep trying, and it'll come through at some point. At least I'm optimistic that it will.
I think it will.
Yeah.
I've seen your science. I think it will. I can tell you that I have worked with about 190 different PIs across the institution, and the ones who apply at a high volume level have the greatest chances of success. And I think it's just like anything else, practice makes perfect. So I definitely echo that if you put more things out there, chances are you're going to get a return on that investment of your time. So I just wanted to thank everybody. I think there's a QR code there for feedback. Please let us know what you think. Thank you to Josh and to Scott and to Christina. We appreciate your advice and your expertise and your knowledge and your time. And thank you to Camelia and to Brittany for helping us. And thanks to Karen. She and I liaise every day, so please reach out. She's also a science PhD, so she definitely is a great help in that arena as well. Karen, did you have anything else to add?
Nope. Those who would like the slides, Brittany will share them, and feel free to email us with any questions. Our contacts are in the slides.
Thank you. Have a great day.